What's up, you guys? Carlos Toro here of FightfulBoxing.com. It is Thursday, the second Thursday, and it is now the Fightful Boxing podcast. Every other week, we do one here on the Fightful MMA and Boxing channel. Here to give a recap, sort of what's been going on in the world of boxing, previewing what's ahead. And if this is your first time here, thank you so much for tuning in and hope you enjoy Fightful and what we have to offer. We don't offer just boxing. We offer tons of MMA content and pro wrestling content. You can head on over to our Fightful Pro Wrestling channel where we do tons of post-show reviews, Raw, SmackDown. We also got Fightful Select, our Patreon, where you can also listen to tons of great shows that are also exclusive to Fightful Select. Lots of stuff to go to check out over there on Fightful.com. But right now, it is the Fightful Boxing Podcast. New newsletter is out. Not a whole ton of big news coming out in the last couple of weeks. I thought, and a lot of people thought, we were going to get something regarding Gennady Golovkin, an announcement of some sort, or Anthony Joshua, the fight against Jarrell Miller. We at least get that announced. That still has not been made. Alexander Usyk, his future is still not there. His future is still not set in stone. He's still the undisputed cruiserweight champion. And while the idea is that he's going to make his heavyweight debut in May, that still has not been formally announced. So really there's quite a lot there's still not a whole lot of news being made this week. Except for the World Boxing Super Series, which I guess maybe to a lot of people it's not the biggest news out there, but it's certainly a big news. So for those of you that don't know, what happened was a few days back, the World Boxing Super Series still had not announced any of the six semifinal tournament bouts across bantamweight, junior welterweight, and cruiserweight tournament. And an ESPN report came out and said that Ivan Baranchyk, who is the IBF junior welterweight champion, one of the semifinalists, he is withdrawing from the tournament. And that's gonna throw a whole big wrench into what the WBSS was planning. Part of the reason why he was leaving, to sort of paraphrase it, he was not happy with his bonus with payments coming in very late. There was not a lot of communication back and forth between both sides. We were supposed to have the semifinals take place in early January, early 2019, but we still haven't had a single semifinal fight coming in, and the earliest one is going to be in May. So the ESPN report stated Barancyk's out. He doesn't want to be a part of the tournament anymore. And then what happened was, less than 24 hours later, after that ESPN report, the World Boxing Super Series says, "Hold on, player. We got you. We got your semifinal bout. Josh Taylor, May 18 at the SSE Hydro in Glasgow, Scotland." Now, if that fight is going to in fact happen, that's a big if. That's a really great fight. I love that fight. It has the potential to be the best fight in the entire tournament across all three tournaments. Now, it's very, very weird what happened, because the time in between the announcement and the report is just really, really suspect that they would announce the fight almost immediately after that initial report came out. And it wasn't, and while some may chalk it up to coincidence, not so. I really don't think so. I do think that this was in response to that ESPN report. So what happened was they made the announcement that Baranchyk is going to fight Taylor. Then they released another statement saying, we invested a lot of money into all of this. We haven't really had any actual formal withdrawal from Baranchyk, and all the fighters competing in the World Boxing Super Series is under contract. and we expect those fighters to fulfill those contracts. So there might be a potential legal battle between Barachik and the World Boxing Super Series, but it is a very weird and ongoing story that really we still don't know, maybe perhaps the full details or what is to what's to come next. Obviously, the World Boxing Super Series has had a lot of problems this season. I mean, first of all, from the lackluster cruiserweight fights and I guess roster. Don't get me wrong, I like the roster. I like, Mairis Briedis, Krzysztof Glowacki, let's see who else, Junior Dordikos in that tournament. And they got Andrew Tabiti, who's a really nice up-and-coming rising star at cruiserweight, part of that Mayweather Boxing Club, but he's not anything too great. I don't think he's at the world championship level just yet. And he's fighting Junior Dorticos, but his fight has not been announced. So the World Boxing Super Series had a lot of issues, from the lackluster cruiserweight field, as I mentioned, to the late payments, the reported late payments. The World Boxing Super Series said some fighters had not gotten paid on time. Or maybe not their full payment, not their full purse, but maybe certain bonuses. And this is referring to some fighters, which were not really specified, but it's looking like Barachik was one of those fighters that were not paid in time. And the general lack of communication between officials, the delays in the tournament, even though no one's actually injured. It's a very, very weird and precarious situation that the World Boxing Super Series is in right now. And in my opinion, it has lost a ton of momentum. The tournament was coming off a really, really good finals from the first season, from Usyk becoming the undisputed cruiserweight champion to Callum Smith just shocking the world by just the decimating George Gross. We didn't get anything that great in the second season outside of the Naoya Inoue knockout over Juan Carlos Payano. But in this world where social media and news and information and big fights happen at a rapid pace, that's old news. The knockout's old news. No one's talking about Naoya Inoue. That was, October? We're right now in February. No one's talking about Naoya Inoue. And they still have not announced 4 of the 6 overall tournament semifinals, where they're taking place, when they're taking place. Are some of them going to be double headers, or some of them going to be their own card? We don't know yet. And there's a lot of reports about certain fights taking place on certain dates, others taking place on double headers. We don't know. And that's the problem with the World Boxing Super Series. The first season, its main issue was that there was no U.S. broadcaster. Or at the very least, there was no, I guess, television broadcaster that most people in the country had, or the online streams were not great. It was a big mess on that side here in the United States. But in this season, it's looking like it's lack of communication, lack of organization, which is very weird considering that we just had a full season where, outside of the U.S. broadcast and the injuries to the finalists on both cruiserweight and super middleweight tournaments, tournament kind of went off without a hitch. So to kind of have these problems arise, it does not bode well for the future of the World Boxing Super Series. So I don't know. I don't like what's going on with this tournament. I really, really wish they would fix this at some point very, very soon, because I love the tournament concept. I've always been a fan of tournaments and really pretty much anything, even outside of sports. So to kind of have this issue, this concept, as great as it is, just kind of, I guess, going up in flames, it's not good for the sport. I never understood why people on social media are kind of actively rooting for the World Boxing Super Series to fail and all that kind of stuff. I'm not one to ask people, or at least wish people would fail, or wish ill upon people or companies or whoever it be. I'm not that kind of guy, but come on, this tournament had the potential to be a real game changer. And so far, we're 1.5 seasons in, and we have not seen anything that's really game changing. We've had 2 guys really benefit from the World Boxing Super Series. That's Alexander Usyk and Callum Smith, and nothing else. As I mentioned, you can make a case for Naoya Inoue, but his knockout over Juan Carlos Payano was in October. No one's talking about Naoya Inoue anymore. All of the momentum he gained from that win, gone. He needs to restart that momentum. He has a really good fight against Emmanuel Rodriguez, but we don't know where the hell that's going to take place. We don't know when the hell it's going to take place. So at first, it appeared April in Los Angeles. They, according to Mike Cominger, they couldn't find any venue for it. Not a single venue for 2 excellent world title fights in the bantamweight division. Essentially, 2 world title unifications, if you count the WBA regular bantamweight title as kind of its own thing. So it's a very unfortunate thing that we're seeing in the World Boxing Super Series, and it really does suck. It sucks that we are not getting the fights as soon as we were promised, and as soon as we would have loved to see them. Everyone's healthy, no one's injured. Just make the fights. At this point, I don't think we're going to get a season 3 of the World Boxing Super Series if this continues. I really don't think so. And if the problems constantly persist throughout the remainder of the 3 tournaments that we have in this second season, I don't want to see a 3rd season. I don't, because there's a lot of great boxers that are missing out on big contracts, potentially multi-million-dollar contracts, because ESPN, Showtime, Fox, DAZN, they're all throwing money out the wazoo at these fighters who are free agents, and these guys in the World Boxing Super Series are not getting these big contracts, and they deserve them because they're tremendous boxers. They're widely entertaining, and those networks would love to have them, but they can't because of the World Boxing Super Series. And as long as this tournament keeps delaying things, it's going to hurt the sport in the long run. So that's kind of really what we have so far of the World Boxing Super Series. But I get that is a big story. Another big story that I guess we all expected to end by this point, or at least get an actual, set in stone announcement, was Anthony Joshua. Now, last time we had this show, the idea was that Dillian Whyte was going to be the front runner to face Anthony Joshua. The idea was April 13th, Wembley Stadium, for the unified WBA, IBF, and WBO titles. Now, 2 weeks later, we have had no fight announcement between Joshua and Dillian Whyte. The date for April, the reserve date for April 13, that show not happening anymore. So I don't know what happened. From what it looks like from the interviews between, with Eddie Hearn and with Dillian Whyte, it looks like it all came down to the negotiations went awry at some point. Well, it kind of went awry from the start because Dillian Whyte was not happy with the offer that he got, where I believe was £4 million, if I'm not mistaken. So he wasn't happy. They couldn't negotiate something quickly, and we're right now in February. The show was supposed to take place in April 13th at Wembley because they reserved that all the way back in, I believe, September or August for Anthony Joshua to fight. Now that fight's not happening because it's way too close to April 13th, and we have had no actual fight announcement. So, as I mentioned a couple of weeks back, now they go back to the backup plan, which I guess is technically the backup to the backup plan, because Dillian Whyte was the backup plan for April 13th in case Anthony Joshua doesn't get Deontay Wilder, and that's not going to happen. So Anthony Joshua and Jarrell Miller are very, very close, as of this podcast, very, very close to signing the deal. It's not official, it's not signed, but it is expected to be signed, and it is expected to be official. The date has not been agreed upon yet, but everything does point for it to being either June 1 or June 8 at Madison Square Garden on DAZN. That's going to be those are the details that we all of us pretty much operated on, whether it be from reports from, I don't know, Ring Magazine, or the reports here on Fightful, or from what Eddie Hearn himself has said. So really, we all kind of expect this fight to be made at some point very soon, but it's a very, very unfortunate thing for Dillian Whyte, because he missed out on a massive, massive fight, on a massive payday, all because they couldn't get the Anthony Joshua fight. So Joshua versus Miller, I don't hate this fight. I don't know if Miller deserves a shot at the heavyweight titles. At the very least, I'll say this, this will be the test. I mean, he's definitely, if he's not ready to face Anthony Joshua now, if he's not ready, then he was never going to be ready to face Anthony Joshua, whether if he would have taken 2-3 more fights before facing him. I think a lot of people are, the narrative of Jarrell Miller being fat, and I've said this before, it's kind of, I don't want to say overplayed, but I guess it's misguided, because Jarrell Miller is a very hefty guy. His nickname is Big Baby for a reason, and I do put the emphasis on the big. But Jarrell Miller is a strong puncher. He's a very mobile guy for someone of his weight. And overall, I don't hate the fight. It's a good slugfest, in my opinion. I mean, we all kind of saw how Anthony Joshua versus Alexander Povetkin was. It was kind of a weird fight, but it wasn't a bad fight, in my opinion. And I think we're going to get a better fight with Jarrell Miller. He's younger, he's fresher, I think he's a stronger puncher, and he moves better than Alexander Povetkin, in my opinion. So overall, where this stands, I think this fight is going to be a good one. I don't hate it. I think this is going to be a good fight. But where did this leave Dillian Whyte? Now, the idea now is that they're going to have a boxing card at the O2 Arena in London on April 20. And Eddie Hearn kind of wants to make this like a night of heavyweight fights. So it's obviously going to be Dillian Whyte against either Luis Ortiz, Alexander Povetkin, or Dominic Breazeale. Now, based on contextual clues and based on what Dillian Whyte has said, one would think that the favorite would be Dominic Breazeale, because Breazeale is the WBC mandatory challenger. Dillian Whyte has made it no secret that he wants to fight Deontay Wilder sometime in the future. They're both in the top 3 of the WBC heavyweight rankings. So I don't think that this fight, I think that's be a good fight. I think Dillian Whyte, in my opinion, should be the favorite. And it'll be a nice fight. It's not an attractive fight here in the U.S., but I think from what we've seen time and time again, Dillian Whyte has proven to be a really, really good draw in the UK, whether it be drawing a very large gate for someone who doesn't have a heavyweight title, or a non-pay-per-view. He draws very solid pay-per-view numbers for someone who isn't Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. I like this fight. So the idea is that the card will have 4 heavyweight fights, at least 4. You have Dillian Whyte against one of the 3 that I just mentioned. Carlos Takam versus Michael Hunter, who, by the way, Michael Hunter, goddamn, he is one of the best, one of the fastest rising heavyweights right now. And I never would have expected that to happen, considering how he was defeated very, very easily by Alexander Usyk a few years back here in the U.S. So Michael Hunter is looking really good. So Carlos Takam versus Michael Hunter, that's a good fight. David Allen versus Lucas Brown, that's another good fight. It's not great, but it's a good fight. That's been a fight that's been brewing for a few months now. And Eddie Hearn did say the fight is signed and it's going to happen in April. I guess the idea was April 13 at Wembley, but because they haven't done it, But because the Wembley show's not happening, the O2 Arena on April 20 is the next best thing. And then lastly, I believe Joseph Parker versus Derek Chisora, that's a good fight. That is a great fight, in my opinion. Joseph Parker started to regain some of the confidence that he lost from losing to Dillian White and Anthony Joshua last year. And Derek Chisora has proven that against the right opponent, he can produce absolutely sensational heavyweight bouts. In my opinion, in terms of pure action, Derek Chisora was a part of the best heavyweight fight of 2018 with Dillian White. And that's my opinion. I think Derek Chisora and Dillian White had an outstanding fight. One of the best heavyweight fights of the year, arguably the best heavyweight fight of the year. And you got that quadruple header of heavyweight fights. I like it. I think it's a good, solid fight. I hope the DAZN picks it up because we would get those 4 fights at least on the DAZN. But if it's Showtime, we're only going to get the main event, maybe a second fight if Showtime's feeling generous. So overall, I like this heavyweight fight. I don't mind Anthony Joshua versus Jarrell Miller. You need to start Joshua fighting the U.S. at some point. And he wasn't never going to fight Deontay Wilder next. He was never going to fight Tyson Fury next. If he isn't going to fight a guy like Luis Ortiz or Alexander Povetkin, you already beat Alexander Povetkin, like Luis Ortiz or Dillian White next, then what can I say? Jarrell Miller's the next best thing that you got right now, which is, not a bad thing considering to some people, Jarrell Miller is, I guess, the 6th, 7th best heavyweight out there. You got Dillian White, Dillian White, Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder. That's 4. You could make a case maybe that Joseph Parker is still better, is a better boxer than Jarrell Miller. So, you also got Luis Ortiz, who almost beat Deontay Wilder. So you got 6 guys that you make a case are higher up than Jarrell Miller. So it's not a terrible fight. It's still a top 10 heavyweight. It's just not the exciting super fight that we all wish Joshua would have next. As far as it being in Madison Square Garden, I don't see that fight being a sellout. Jarrell Miller, no offense to him, he's not the biggest draw as far as New Yorkers are concerned. He hasn't had a big main event in New York to sort of test that. He had a main event on the DAZN a few months back, but it didn't sell exceptionally well. And overall, and Joshua is kind of a bit of an unknown, relative unknown, I should say, here in the U.S. So I don't know if it's going to do 18, 19,000 at the Garden, but it'll do at least 10,000, might do 12, 13. It just depends what the undercard's going to look like. And it's going to be a Matchroom boxing card, so they really going to have to work hard to make this card, the other card, a really good one to make it attractive to local New Yorkers. Now, speaking of fights that are taking place that took place in places where the two fighters are not exactly local draws there, Top Rank Boxing had a card in Frisco, Texas at the Star, which is the Dallas Cowboys practice facility last weekend. Eleider Alvarez versus Sergey Kovalev to WBO light heavyweight title. This fight, it was not great, in my opinion. It was not exciting. Kovalev just dominated. He has a new trainer with Buddy McGirt, the future Hall of Famer, Buddy McGirt, who really got Kovalev to really go back to basics and kind of take an old school approach to this fight. And he looks great. He looks sensational. Kovalev, what happened was Kovalev simply went back to just outboxing. He didn't try to look for the knockout. He simply jabbed, outworked Eleider Alvarez, pressured him into not really doing anything. And Kovalev did really well against Eleider Alvarez. He won by unanimous decision, 121-08. And the other two judges, 116-112. I had it 118-108 for Kovalev. I had Alvarez winning the the first round and the fifth round, and that's just about it. I didn't think this fight was close in any way, shape, or form. I gotta addressing here some of the media scores that were in Texas that said that the fight was really, really close. I don't pay too much attention to that because the problem here is that when you have media covering fights, and they're scoring, and they're also kind of doing live round by round coverage, it's very hard to accurately score rounds, all 12 rounds, especially in a world title fight where the scrutiny is going to be that much bigger. I don't really put the blame on Mike Coppinger, who initially gave a 115-113 score and said, listen, that's on, I screwed up. That score is not really indicative of how the fight really went, and I really did not pay the attention it deserved to scoring it. So 115-113 is not a great score, which I kind of commend. I commend Mike Coppinger for admitting that he messed up with the scorecards. So I commend him for that. And I don't blame him if he had a bad scorecard. Listen, sometimes us media, we're tasked with not just giving our thoughts on a fight as it's happening, but scoring it, typing out stuff on deadline. It's really, really hard to expect media to have the absolute best opinion when it comes to scoring a fight if they're doing all that prior. Now, that being said, I don't think, it could have been much worse. He could have said the fight was a draw or that Alvarez won. Could be much worse, but overall, I don't mind it too much. Now, going back to the fight itself, so Kovalev just dominated Alvarez. This Alvarez, goddamn, he did not look great in the fight. He looked very, very cautious. Was not willing to let his hands go. And the story of the fight, essentially, inside the fight, was that Kovalev was headhunting, but he wasn't trying to look for the knockout. He was just jabbing his way, doing an excellent work upstairs, and kind of pressuring Alvarez to just defend. And here's the one thing I loved about during the whole fight. So every time Kovalev would go headhunting, especially late in the fight. So what Alvarez would do is he would put his hands up like this, kind of cover his face, and instead of Kovalev kind of jabbing his way to kind of split that defense, he does a right hook. He first sets it up with the left jab, gets Alvarez to put his hands up, and then Kovalev gets the right hook and kind of lands right over here on the, well, I guess technically the left jaw, or I guess left side of the head, and it just worked beautifully. It was a very old school approach to the fight. Kovalev, with this kind of performance, if he keeps fighting like this with Buddy McGirt as his trainer, I would say Kovalev is still the best light heavyweight in the world. It's going to be very interesting what his next fights are going to be, because I don't think he has a mandatory challenger. The rest of the light heavyweight title scene is kind of preoccupied at the moment. Alexander Vostok doesn't have his next fight set, but not going to be against Sergey Kovalev next. Marcus Brown is the interim champion, but he's not fighting Sergey Kovalev next. I would not expect that fight to happen next. Dmitry Bivol has signed with DAZN, and Artur Beterbiev, who knows what's up with him? He apparently left DAZN. He's apparently hooking up with ESPN, but we haven't had any official announcement regarding so. So it's a very, very kind of precarious situation that we have in the light heavyweight title situation. But I can tell you this right now, Kovalev is a good name in boxing in terms of drawing eyeballs to your product, and ESPN is certainly going to really kind of have a difficult time trying to market Kovalev. Not the in-ring fighter, because we all know how great Kovalev is as a fighter. But with his recent problems with the law, with the alleged, incident where he allegedly punched a woman in the face in last summer in Big Bear, California. He has the impending lawsuit. He's doing court next month, and ESPN, and I must say, to their credit, they did not shy away from this story. A lot of the story of this of the evening outside of the ring was the legal issues that Kovalev had, and I gotta say, I commend ESPN for drawing attention to it. They did not shy away, even though this was their main event fighter, and now one of their big names, one of the big faces for ESPN boxing. But it's got to be hard to market Sergey Kovalev from here on onward, unless they completely prove that Kovalev was innocent of any wrongdoing or was found not guilty. It's very hard to market Sergey Kovalev next, but it's not impossible, but it's a very, very tough order and a very, very difficult PR task. So I do not envy those working for ESPN PR and Top Rank PR having to deal with this situation. But the undercard was solid. It had a lot of big names. You had Oscar Valdez coming back from a broken jaw, hasn't fought in almost a year. He beat Carmine Tomasone by knockout in the 7th round to retain the WBO featherweight title. Good fight. I gotta say, it was a good performance. I should say the fight was nowhere near competitive. It was one-sided from start to end. Carmine Tomasone didn't deserve to have a world title fight. Valdez ended with a 7th round knockout at the start of the round. It was, I believe, a left hand to the body, and it just dropped Tomasone almost immediately. Was not going to get up, and Valdez won, retained his title. Good performance. I think he's ready for the fights against, guys like Josh Warrington, who's defending his title against Kid Galahad next. And, I would love to see Oscar Valdez fight Leo Santa Cruz, although that fight is, or Gary Russell. Neither of those two fights are happening anytime soon, if ever, because Santa Cruz and Russell are with PBC. But, hey, Oscar Valdez is a really fun guy, but with the way the featherweight title scene is looking like, I don't know if you can get him big fights. It's really tough to get him for Oscar Valdez. And obviously, the ESPN has tried really hard to put him in a position to succeed, and hopefully he does, because he is certainly an excellent boxer. You can make a case that he is the best featherweight in the world. Maybe I would put him a little bit below Gary, I guess a little bit below Gary Russell Jr., arguably, and certainly below Leo Santa Cruz. So it all really depends on what's going to be next for Oscar Valdez. So hopefully he gets something big. Also on the undercard, you had Richard Comey go up against Isa Chaniev for the vacant IBF lightweight title. I can tell this right now, Richard Comey, and by the way, this is a pattern. Another big fight, one-sided. Except in this case, Richard Comey ended things in less than 4 minutes. He knocked out Isa Chaniev in the 2nd round, less than a minute into the 2nd round, to win the vacant IBF lightweight champion. Now sets himself up for the unification fight against WBO champion Vasily Lomachenko in April. Now, apparently today, and I have not heard any news coming out of it, but apparently today, Comey is getting a hand scan because apparently he injured one of his hands during the fight against Isa Chaniev, which could put a potential April 12th date against Vasily Lomachenko in doubt. Now, what does that mean for Richard Comey? He has to make a choice, essentially. If he feels he's good enough to fight Lomachenko, then we got our main event. If not, then Kobe will have to wait a little longer to get the unification fight against Vasily Lomachenko. And it's a risk versus reward position, regardless of whether or not he's healthy. Richard Kobe would be coming into the fight against Lomachenko as a very big underdog. Even if the hand is good enough to fight, remember, we're talking about 2 months, almost exactly 2 months from now. And I'm not sure that's enough time to prepare for Lomachenko. I really don't. And quite frankly, I really do think that this fight could be a really fun fight. I think he presents a certain challenge to Lomachenko, a very strong challenge to Lomachenko, because I think Comey is a more aggressive fighter than Jorge Linares and Jose Pedraza. And it's going to be, I think that's a really interesting fight. I think Lomachenko will win that fight, but Richard Comey, I would not count Richard Comey out, because he is a really good fighter and arguably could have been the IBF champion much sooner had it not been for a split decision loss to Robert Easter. And I apologize if I sound a little stuffy. I've been dealing with a cold for the last 2 weeks, essentially. Last couple of weeks, really, I've been very, very stuffy. So I apologize if I sound like that, but show must go on. And lastly, the, I guess, co-main event of that top-ranked card, Teofimo Lopez versus Diego Magdaleno. Another one-sided beatdown, but I think this was the most unexpected beatdown because Diego Magdaleno is a very well-respected veteran, and I expected him to push Teofimo Lopez to some sort of challenge. Instead, Lopez kind of essentially made him look like an amateur by comparison. And and Lopez has shown skills-wise that he deserves to be in their conversation for a potential world title shot. I think he's ready. He is definitely a world title contender at this point. I think the prospect label, I think it's over. Teofimo Lopez is the real deal. He's flashy. He's really good. He's an excellent knockout artist. And by meaning excellent, I really do mean excellent, from the actual knockout to the knockout celebration. And that was really the story of the actual fight, the knockout celebration. So if you see Teofimo Lopez fight, you know that he does these almost exaggerated celebrations after he scores a knockout by, I don't know, doing a backflip or doing a dance he got from Fortnite. It's a very, very expressive person, to say the least. And so the conference to the problem was, after the fight, again, when he knocked out Diego Magdaleno was still out. He still had not gone back to his feet. And then Teofimo did a backflip. And they kind of motioned towards, I believe it was like a swinging motion towards Magdaleno's head. And everybody took offense to that. They call it unprofessional. It was, not what you want from a future star. And a lot of people were very unhappy with how Teofimo Lopez conducted himself after the fight. And Lopez kind of defended himself by saying Diego Magdaleno was talking a lot of trash before and during the fight, and he kind of had it coming, I guess, sort of to paraphrase it. Now, I may come in with an unpopular opinion. I had no problem with Teofimo Lopez and his celebration. I had no problem whatsoever with the celebration. And here's why. From time to time again, we have seen guys such as, and throughout combat sports, such as Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor and all these other big personalities kind of become major stars. Adrian Broner, another great example, whom a lot of people may not think that they are the best at their sport, or pound for pound, they're not exactly number one, as a lot of mainstream people would believe. But they get the biggest fights because they're such big personalities. They don't, or they could make a case for being the best athlete or the best fighter, but that's not what really draws people in. The personalities, the star power, the name recognition, all of that, the marketing, all of that in this day and age, that's what sells fights. It's not so much the championships. It's not so much the athlete's skill. Because for God's sakes, if the most popular fighters today are the most skillful fighters out there, then first of all, we wouldn't have Adrian Broner fighting on pay-per-view because he's not the best fighter out there. He's not the best welterweight. He's not the best junior welterweight. You can make a case he's not top 10 fighter in either of those weight classes. Yet he still gets main event. Yes, he still gets pay-per-view fights because of his personality. And people, for better or worse, love to hate him. And that draws eyeballs. That draws viewership. That draws attendance numbers. That's what networks want. Teofimo Lopez. You may think that he's not as good as Lomachenko. You may think he'll never be as good as Lomachenko. But that's not what the idea for Teofimo Lopez is. That's not what he's set out to be for Top Rank. He's set out to be this flashy, energetic, exciting guy that is rising up the ranks and is a major superstar in the making. He's bilingual. He speaks to the media well. He carries himself very well out of the ring. Say what you want about the celebration itself against Diego Magdaleno. He's flashy. He's exciting. He's legitimately a very good boxer, and he knocks people out in spectacular fashion. And his celebrations for those knockouts are really, really fun. They draw people in. They draw the people that play Fortnite in. They draw the casual audience in. They draw the non-boxing fans in. That's why ESPN replays Teofimo Lopez knockout highlight. That's why they replay the celebrations, because it draws people in. Yes, you can admire Teofimo Lopez and his abilities, but the thing that makes him really over with the crowds and with the non-boxing fans or with the casual audience is the celebration, his big personality, his flashiness inside the ring. It's not so much the actual skills, it's not so much the substance, it's more the flash. And in this day and age, that's what you look for in big stars, not the skills, although it plays a part of it, but the primary thing is, can you draw eyeballs in? Can you draw people into your fights? And Teofimo Lopez, for better or worse, that's what he does. You look at the social media numbers, you look at the YouTube views. He is a draw, for better or worse. He's not someone that you can build